History is filled with prolonged and grueling wars, but few conflicts have captured the imagination quite like the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. Lasting just between 38 and 45 minutes, this brief yet intense engagement holds the distinction of being the shortest recorded war in history. Despite its brevity, the conflict exemplifies the strategic maneuvering of imperial powers during the height of colonialism, highlighting how a clash of interests could escalate into a confrontation with lasting consequences. The Anglo-Zanzibar War was more than just a historical footnote. It was a critical juncture for the Sultanate of Zanzibar and a stark demonstration of the power dynamics between Imperial Britain and its protectorates. The war was the culmination of political intrigue, succession disputes, and the broader struggle for influence in East Africa during the late 19th century. This video examines the causes, events, and aftermath of this unique conflict, offering an in-depth exploration of its legacy and significance within the broader context of colonial history. Zanzibar, an archipelago off the coast of East Africa, was a vital hub of trade and commerce for centuries. Known as the Spice Island, it was renowned for its production of cloves and other spices, attracting merchants from the Arabian Peninsula, India, and Europe. By the 19th century, Zanzibar had also become a central node in the East African slave trade, a practice that drew the attention of abolitionist movements in Europe. The Sultanate of Zanzibar was originally part of the Sultanate of Oman. In 1840, Sultan Said bin Sultan shifted his capital to Zanzibar, recognizing its strategic importance. Following his death in 1856, his realm was divided into two, Oman and Zanzibar. Zanzibar emerged as a semi-independent sultanate under Said's successors, who maintained a complex relationship with European powers seeking to assert control over East Africa. The late 19th century marked the height of the scramble for Africa, during which European powers divided the continent into colonies and protectorates. Zanzibar, with its prime location along key trade routes in the Indian Ocean, became a critical asset in this geopolitical competition. The British Empire, intent on controlling trade and curbing the slave trade, sought to establish dominance over the region. In 1890, the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty formalized Zanzibar's status as a British protectorate. Under the terms of the agreement, Germany recognized British interests in Zanzibar in exchange for the island of Heligoland in the North Sea. This treaty marked the beginning of direct British influence over Zanzibar's internal affairs. One of the key points of contention between the British and Zanzibari leadership was the slave trade. By the mid-19th century, Britain had positioned itself as a global force against slavery, using its naval power to suppress the transatlantic and Indian Ocean slave trades. Zanzibar, however, remained a hub for slavery, with many of its rulers profiting from the trade. British officials pressured the sultans of Zanzibar to abolish slavery, leveraging treaties and political influence to enforce reforms. While some progress was made, the persistence of the slave trade underscored the challenges of imposing change in a society deeply rooted in the practice. The immediate cause of the Anglo-Zanzibar War was a succession crisis following the death of Sultan Hamad bin Thawani on August 25, 1896. Sultan Hamad had cooperated closely with the British and worked to align his policies with their interests. His sudden death created a power vacuum that was swiftly filled by Khalid bin Bargash, a nephew of the late Sultan. Khalid's ascension to the throne was seen as a direct challenge to British authority. Unlike his predecessor, Khalid resisted British influence and sought to assert greater independence for Zanzibar. His actions, including fortifying the palace and rallying supporters, alarmed British officials, who viewed him as a potential threat to their control over the region. Khalid's proclamation as Sultan immediately set him at odds with the British authorities. The British consul in Zanzibar, Basil Cave, declared Khalid's rule illegitimate and called for his immediate abdication in favor of Hamud bin Mohammed, a candidate more favorable to British interests. Khalid refused, asserting his right to the throne and positioning himself as a defender of Zanzibar's sovereignty. In response to Khalid's defiance, the British issued an ultimatum demanding his abdication and the evacuation of the palace by 9 a.m. on August 27, 1896. The ultimatum was backed by a show of force, with British naval vessels, including HMS St. George, HMS Philomel, and HMS Thrush, anchored in the harbor, ready to commence military action if Khalid refused to comply. Both sides prepared for the impending confrontation. Khalid fortified the palace and mobilized approximately 2,800 men, including palace guards, civilians, and conscripts. His forces were equipped with artillery, machine guns, and small arms, though they were poorly trained and ill-equipped to face the British. The British, led by Rear Admiral Harry Rawson, assembled a formidable force that included Royal Marines, Zanzibari askaris loyal to the British, and naval firepower. Their preparations reflected the overwhelming military advantage they held, ensuring that any conflict would be swift and decisive. At precisely 9:02 a.m. on August 27, 1896, the British forces opened fire on the Sultan's palace, initiating the Anglo-Zanzibar War. The bombardment was relentless, with shells and gunfire quickly dismantling Khalid's defenses. Within minutes, the palace was engulfed in flames, and many of Khalid's forces were killed or wounded. The disparity in firepower between the two sides was stark. Khalid's forces, armed with outdated weaponry, were no match for the modern artillery and disciplined tactics of the British. By 9:40 a.m., the bombardment ceased, and the war effectively ended. Khalid fled the palace and sought refuge at the German consulate, leaving his forces in disarray. The war resulted in significant casualties for Khalid's forces, with estimates of around 500 men killed or wounded. In contrast, the British suffered only one minor injury, a testament to their overwhelming superiority. The Sultan's palace and surrounding infrastructure were severely damaged, symbolizing the decisive nature of the conflict. Despite British demands for Khalid to surrender, the German consulate refused to hand him over immediately, citing diplomatic immunity. This created a tense standoff between the British and German authorities. However, the British did not escalate the situation, preferring to avoid a broader international incident. Eventually, the German consulate facilitated Khalid's escape to German East Africa, modern-day Tanzania. He remained in exile until he was later captured by British forces during World War I. Khalid spent much of his life under British custody, effectively ending his aspirations for leadership in Zanzibar. The British wasted no time in asserting their control over Zanzibar's leadership. Within hours of the war's conclusion, they installed Hamoud bin Mohammed as the Sultan. Hamoud was a pro-British figure who cooperated closely with the colonial administration. His rule marked the beginning of significant reforms in Zanzibar, many of which were directed by British officials. One of Sultan Hamoud's first acts was to issue a formal decree abolishing slavery in Zanzibar in 1897. This move aligned with British humanitarian goals and helped legitimize his rule. However, the abolition of slavery also disrupted Zanzibar's social and economic structures, leading to challenges for the new administration. The outcome of the war further solidified British dominance in Zanzibar. While the Sultanate retained nominal autonomy, it was effectively reduced to a client state under British supervision. The British consul became the de facto ruler of Zanzibar, with significant influence over the Sultan's decisions and policies. This arrangement ensured that Zanzibar remained firmly within Britain's sphere of influence, safeguarding its strategic and economic interests in the region. The Anglo-Zanzibar War was a stark demonstration of the asymmetrical power dynamics between imperial powers and their protectorates. The British Empire, armed with advanced weaponry and military expertise, was able to decisively crush resistance within minutes. This conflict underscored the futility of direct confrontation against colonial powers during the late 19th century, a lesson that would resonate throughout the colonial world. The war is often cited as a quintessential example of gunboat diplomacy, a tactic used by imperial powers to achieve their objectives through the threat or use of overwhelming military force. By deploying naval firepower to enforce its demands, Britain demonstrated its ability to maintain control over its protectorates with minimal effort. The war's brevity highlighted the efficiency and effectiveness of this approach, which was frequently employed in other parts of the British Empire. The abolition of slavery, which followed the war, was one of the most significant outcomes for Zanzibar's society. While the British portrayed this as a moral victory, the transition away from a slave-based economy created economic and social challenges. Many former slaves struggled to find employment, while plantation owners faced labor shortages and declining profits. The restructuring of Zanzibar's economy under British supervision marked a shift away from its traditional systems toward a more colonial model. Despite its brevity, the Anglo-Zanzibar War has a lasting place in history as the shortest recorded conflict. Its unique nature has made it a subject of fascination for historians and the general public alike. The war's swift resolution, combined with its symbolic importance, has ensured its enduring legacy as a case study in imperialism, military strategy, and colonial governance. Several factors contributed to the war's unprecedented speed. First and foremost was the overwhelming disparity in military capabilities between the two sides. The British forces, equipped with modern artillery, machine guns, and naval firepower, were vastly superior to Khalid's poorly armed and untrained troops. The element of surprise and the precision of British bombardment also played a crucial role in swiftly dismantling the Sultan's defenses. Additionally, the political context ensured that Khalid's forces received little support. Many Zanzibari elites and commoners were reluctant to challenge British authority, recognizing the futility of resistance. This lack of widespread backing further weakened Khalid's position and expedited the conflict's resolution. The Anglo-Zanzibar War reinforced the effectiveness of Britain's approach to colonial governance. By using decisive military action to quell dissent, the British sent a clear message to other protectorates and colonies. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force. This tactic helped maintain stability within the British Empire, but also exacerbated tensions between colonial rulers and their subjects. The war also highlighted the role of diplomacy in mitigating conflicts. While the British resorted to force to resolve the crisis, they carefully navigated their interactions with other powers, such as Germany, to avoid a broader confrontation. This balance between military action and diplomatic engagement was a hallmark of British imperial strategy. The war offers several lessons about the nature of colonial conflicts. It underscores the importance of military preparedness, the impact of technological superiority, and the complexities of managing local leaders within a colonial framework. Historians have often used the war as a lens through which to examine broader themes, including the ethics of imperialism, the dynamics of power, and the legacy of colonialism. As the shortest recorded conflict in history, the Anglo-Zanzibar War continues to capture the imagination, offering valuable insights into the dynamics of power and resistance in an era of global transformation.